Meeting of the Newark City Council, please come to order. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next item of business is roll call, and do we have to do this manually, Clerk Harrington?
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
The roll call?
Oh, Councilmember Bucci is online, so all council members are present.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so then let the record show that all council members are present this evening. Next item of business is introduction of employees. And so I'd like to ask that Alexis Cross, Brett Overendijk, and Alex Tatt join me in the front there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is three employees that are being promoted or just joining the organization, and I have the pleasure of introducing them to you. First one is Alexis Cross, and Alexis has been here for a while, but she joined the Newark Finance Department in the beginning of May of 2017. She was the cashier with the city and has been promoted to the position of Accounting Assistant 2 and will assist with accounts payable. Alexis grew up in Oakland and graduated from San Francisco State University with a bachelor's degree in English literature. She currently lives in Fremont and is excited to further her career in finance. So Alexis, congratulations, and look forward to many more years of service from you. Thank you. The next person I'd like to introduce is Brett Overendijk. Has been with the city of Newark for over 20 years, with the past 3.5 as an accounting technician and accounts payable with the finance department. Prior to that, he served as a recycling assistant, implementing the city's recycling and waste diversion programs. In October, Brett was promoted to administrative analyst with the Public Works Department. Brett will primarily provide administrative analyst support to each of Public Works' 4 divisions and will also provide assistance to the Environmental Services Division and the city's solid waste management efforts. Brett graduated from San Jose State University with a bachelor's degree in political science and obtained his master's of public administration from Cal State East Bay. Brett lives in Concord with his fiance and their dog, Brody. Brett is an avid 49er and Giants fan, good choices, and especially a San Antonio Spurs fan. Not such a good choice. He and his family enjoy traveling to Las Vegas and will be visiting for the 10th time this year when they go in December. Brett is excited to continue his career with the city of Newark, and he looks forward to helping Newark remain a great place to work and live. Congratulations, Brett. Okay, and our third employee is Alex Tatt. He joins the city of Newark as a senior civil engineer with over 20 years of public and private experience and comes to us from the city of Hayward. Alex graduated from UC Davis with a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering and is a licensed professional engineer. In his spare time, Alex enjoys spending time with his wife and 11-month-old son exploring local parks and playgrounds. Alex enjoys watching and playing tennis and basketball and sampling foods from different regions of the world. Alex is excited to join the City of Newark's Public Works Engineering Division and will be working with the staff to implement, manage, and deliver projects included in the city's capital improvement program. So congratulations to you, Alex, and look forward to a long future with our City of Newark. To all 3 of you, congratulations and thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is public comment on any item that is not listed on the agenda. So for Zoom attendees, please use the raise your hand feature if you'd like to speak. And first of all, I'd like to ask anybody in the audience would like to speak this evening on any item that is not on tonight's agenda. Okay. Clerk Harrington, is there any requests to speak online from our Zoom attendees?
Yes, Your Honor, we have Namat Saxena.
Okay. I'm sorry, what was his name?
Namat Saxena.
Oh, yes, Namit, yes, okay. Is Namit ready?
Namat, you're unmuted. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, City Clerk Harrington, and thank you for the opportunity to address the City Council this evening. First off, I want to thank City Clerk Harrington in helping me with the logistics to present today. Second, congratulations to Vice Mayor Hannon, Councilmember Bucci, and new member Matt Jorgens in getting elected. Third, I have to give you, after you hear me talk about this topic today, you might suffer from blue car syndrome and won't stop thinking about this issue every time you cross the intersection on Maury Avenue and Cherry Street. Now, everyone starts the new year with a New Year resolution, and I think that the bulb out at the Cherry Street and Maury Avenue turn needs to go on a diet New Year as well. If we could go to the first slide, the current design of the bulb out, when you make the left on Cherry Street towards Maury Avenue, is the traffic not only right around that junction, but all the way back to Central Avenue. You can see on the Google Maps screenshot, a lot of orange-red traffic backed up during peak morning rush hour times, especially in the mornings when parents are dropping kids to daycare or people are going to work in the morning. And the same thing happens during the evenings too. Now, if we go to the slide number 2, before bringing this up here today, I discussed this proposal with Mr. Soren Fajo and Mr. Jason Imai, and learned that the left turn was designed over 8 years ago when there was a small e-commerce company that moved into Newark and has now become the biggest retailer in the world, something that no one could have planned for. And congratulations to them on their success. If we go to the third slide, you will see the photo on the left is of a rainy day when I was trying to make a left, but could not make that left due to that big bulb out, plus traffic on the lane that was going straight. The photo on the right is the same issue that happened on a beautiful, clear day in Newark. If we can go to the fourth slide, both photos show Amazonians leaving during their shift change, which has been coordinated with the city of Newark. And they were trying to get onto Maury, but were blocking the lanes that were going straight towards Stevenson Boulevard. I certainly empathize with employees trying to get home, trying to get on 880, and trying to get home after a long day at work. So stuff like this happens, but it just shows you how the bulb out can lead to issues. If we can go to the fifth slide and you zoom in on the photo on the left, you'll see that traffic was backed up all the way to Central Avenue one day. Similarly, on the right, you will see cars are U-turning on Smith Avenue on the photo on the right. So you can see how that bulb out situation leads to backup all the way to Smith Avenue and Central Avenue on Cherry Street. If we can go to the sixth slide, on the right-hand side, you can see how reducing the bulb out can potentially accommodate 22 more cars or 12 more buses or 6 more Amazon trailers. Now, this will not only benefit this immediate intersection, but free up traffic all the way up on Cherry Street up until Central Avenue. I will gladly confess, I'm not a civil engineer, so this is just an option that I drew up, albeit with some calculations. And I'm confident that our city planning staff will do a much better job than me of adhering the redesign of this bulb out to meet the Caltrain's design requirements. City Clerk Harrington, if you can go to the final slide. In closing, other than having to drive through this intersection every day and being stuck in traffic motivating me to speak today, there are two more reasons. First, with the new Costco at New Park Mall that is going to open in 2023, there will be more cars making this left turn versus going straight on Cherry to the Fremont Costco. So there is more traffic that's going to happen on this street. Second, the installation of bike lanes on Cherry is due to begin in 2023, which is a great step forward for the city. However, many residents might incorrectly end up blaming the new bike lanes for increased traffic on Cherry and thereby slow down expansion of bike lanes, which is a critical project for all residents of Newark at all income levels, not only those who can afford cars. I appreciate that the city staff worked with me on this topic and presentation over the last few weeks and informed me that they can only action this if the city council prioritizes this for 2023. So I request that the city council prioritize this diet plan and request city staff to explore how they can accommodate this unfunded project for 2023 by potentially combining it with other work on Maori and Cherry. So with that, I'd like to hand it back and once again appreciate the time and effort this evening.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else this evening, Ms. Harrington?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. And the consent calendar consists of items D1 through D19. Are there any items that staff would like pulled from the consent calendar?
Not this evening, Your Honor.
Okay. Are there any items that anybody in the audience would like pulled from the consent calendar? D1 through D19? Okay. City Council, any items D1 through D19 that you'd like pulled from the consent calendar? So you can make me read all of these. Okay, here we go. The consent calendar consists of the following items. D1 is approval of the audited demands. D2 is approval of the October 27th, 2022 minutes. Item D3 is adopt a resolution confirming the continued existence of a local emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Item D4 is adopt a resolution finding that there is a proclaimed state of emergency, finding that the meeting in person would present imminent risk to the public health and safety of attendees as a result of the state of the emergency, and authorizing continued remote teleconference meetings of the legislative bodies of the City of Newark for the 30-day period beginning November 10th, pursuant to AB 361. Item D5 is a motion accepting the Measure GG Transportation Transaction and Use Tax Oversight Committee Annual Report for fiscal year 2020-2021. Item D6 is adopt a resolution reappointing Jeff Aguilar to the Planning Commission. Item D7 is adopt a resolution accepting public subdivision improvements for Tract 8310 Bay Shores Phase 2, an 86-unit residential subdivision generally located on the southeast corner of Hickory Street and Seawin Way in Bayside, Newark. Item D8 is adopt a resolution accepting public subdivision improvements for Tract 8085 Bay Shores Phase 1, a 213-unit residential subdivision generally located on the west side of Willow Street between Central Avenue and Seawin Way in Bayside, Newark. Item D9 is adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute task order number 27 to the joint powers agreement with the City of Fremont for paratransit services. Item D10 is adopt a resolution adopting a compensation plan for certain positions in the exempt service employee group to amend the part-time, seasonal, and temporary classifications, schedule of hourly wage rates, and revoking previous resolutions in conformance with the California Code of Regulations, Title II, Section 570.5. Item D11 is adopt a resolution approving the Measure D expenditure plan and amend the 2022-2024 biennial budget and capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2022, 2023, and 2023-2024. Item D12 is adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the city manager to execute the annual Sunridge Systems Incorporated Software Support Services Agreement. Item D13 is adopt resolutions to, number one, approve an amendment to the classification plan to add the class specification of principal civil engineer. Two, approve an amendment to the 2022-2024 biennial budget and capital improvement plan to replace one full-time equivalent senior civil engineer with one full-time equivalent principal civil engineer, and authorization for one additional full-time equivalent associate civil engineer. And three, approve an amendment to the City of Newark compensation and benefit plan for the management, supervisory, and professional employee group to add the classification of principal civil engineer and assign salary range 17. Item D14 is adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a software as a service agreement with Xero Holdings LLC to provide annual cloud hosting, security, backup, upgrades, and maintenance support services for an intranet, and amending the 2022-2024 biennial budget and capital improvement plan to appropriate $29,353.50 in fiscal year 2022-2023 for the implementation cost, a one-time fee, and year one of the agreement, and $21,356.25 in fiscal year 2023-2024 for year two of the agreement. Item D15 is adopt a resolution approving used oil payment program expenditures for fiscal year 2022. Item D16 is adopt a resolution authorizing the purchase of 3 vehicles for the Newark Police Department directly from auto dealerships with single source findings. Item D17 is adopt a resolution authorizing the purchase of 4 Ford Interceptors for the Newark Police Department from Folsom Lake Ford, and adopt the resolution authorizing increased not to exceed amount of up to $136,000 for Lear Auto Electric and to $20,000 for Classic Graphics under their respective fiscal year 2023 annual purchase agreements. Item D18 is adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with Lear Auto Electric to purchase 20 police department mobile data computers and installation of 5 of the computers. Item D19 is adoptive of a resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate and enter into a contractual services agreement in a form approved by the city attorney with Universal Building Services and Supply Company for janitorial services for city buildings, and amendment of the 2022-2024 biennial budget and capital improvement plan. Would someone like to move the items be approved as recommended by staff, with any items approved by resolution or ordinance being numbered consecutively, and that the reading of the title suffice for purpose of introduction or adoption of the ordinance? As read. Okay. Okay, and City Clerk Harrington, would you please call the vote?
Councilmember Bucci?
Aye.
Councilmember Collazo? Aye. Councilmember Freitas?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hannon? Aye. Mayor Nagy?
Aye.
Motion passes 5 ayes.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is a public hearing. Staff report, please, Mr. Benoon.
Yes, good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. Item E1 is a public hearing to consider staff's recommendation for certain amendments to the city's building code. The council may recall approximately a month ago, the council set tonight for the public hearing for this triennial building code amendment public hearing. Tonight, our chief building official, Mr. Matthew Farrell, will provide the staff report. Mr. Farrell.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. As we know, every 3 years, the California Building Standard Codes are updated. As required by the state law, these codes become effective on January 1st, 2023. Prior to the mandatory adoption, jurisdictions have the opportunity to modify these codes, provided that the changes do not lower the standards and are necessary to address local conditions. On October 13th, 2022, Council heard the first reading of an ordinance to repeal and replace current municipal code sections and adopt a resolution approving findings related to the need for the local amendments to the provisions in the state construction codes. The council also set today's meeting for a public hearing on the item. There are 12 parts of the California Title 24 Building Standards Code. Staff is recommending creation of a new section outlining Newark's administrative code. Following the state requirements, staff is also recommending adopting 6 of the codes with amendments. Those codes are building, residential, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire. Staff is recommending adopting the remaining 6 codes without amendments. Those codes are reference standards, historical building, existing building, energy, green building, and the administrative code. As staff noted during October 13th meeting, all proposed amendments involve administration standards or technical changes that are carried over from previous ordinances. The new amendments recommended for adoption by City Council involve clarification for electrical and equipment safety. The sprinkler modifications of the building and fire codes are to align with the city's existing fire code amendments. The language proposed for residential sprinklers, when they would be required to install in existing structures, is intended to be a practical approach for a reasonably cost-effective install. Staff recommends that the City Council conduct the required public hearing and then waive the second reading and adopt the proposed ordinance by title only to repeal and replace the designated chapters of the Title 15 of the Newark Municipal Code in order to adopt by reference the 2022 California Building Standards Code with modifications to address unique local conditions pursuant to the findings under City Resolution Number 11,415. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. So why don't we open the public hearing? The public hearing to consider an ordinance to repeal and replace certain chapters of Title 15 of the Newark Municipal Code in order to adopt by reference with modification to address unique local conditions. The 2022 California Building Code Standards Code is now open. So would anybody in the audience like to speak on this item? Okay. Ms. Harrington, are there any requests on Zoom?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. So then with any comments from the City Council? Yes, Vice Mayor Hannon.
Just a quick question, clarification. The sprinkler system requirements, are they required in accessory dwelling unit, not accessory dwellings, in the what do they call those units? The
ADU.
ADUs, thank you. Are sprinkler systems required in the ADUs?
Only if the primary structure has sprinklers. So if the primary structure does not have sprinklers, ADUs would not receive the requirement to provide sprinklers.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so the public hearing is closed. Would someone like to make a motion?
So move item E1.
I'll second that, Mayor.
Okay. City Clerk Harrington, call the vote.
Councilmember Bucci?
Aye.
Councilmember Collazo? Aye. Councilmember Freitas?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hannon?
Aye.
Mayor Nagy?
Aye.
Motion passes 5 ayes.
Thank you.
Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Newark repealing and replacing chapters 1502, 1508, 1509, 1510, 1512, 1516, 1517, 1518, 1520, 1521, 1522, and 1523 of Title 15, Buildings and Construction of the New York Municipal Code, in order to adopt by reference with modifications to address unique local conditions, 2022 editions of the California Administrative Code, California Building Code, California Residential Code, California Mechanical Code, California Electrical Code, California Plumbing Code, California Fire Code, the California Reference Standards Code, the California Historical Building Code, California Existing Building Code, California Energy Code, the California Green Building Standard Code.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is other business. Staff report, please, Mr. Benoon.
Yes, good evening, Your Honor, members. Item F, recommendation from city staff for the city to enter into an agreement with Group 4 Architecture, Research, and Planning Incorporated. This is a consultant that will help us in developing the city's first citywide facilities master plan. Tonight, our administrative analyst, Ms. Roya Gonzalez, will provide the council with the staff report. Following that, the council will have an opportunity to ask questions for the recommended consultant. This happens to be the same consultant that provided services to the city 6 years ago, and the city underwent the Civic Center feasibility study. They were not selected because of that. They were selected because they performed the best in the analysis and the scoring metrics. So with that, I'll pass it over to Administrative Analyst, Ms. Roya Gonzalez, for the staff report. Ms. Gonzalez, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Oops. I'm looking forward to updating you on the status of the citywide facilities master plan project. This plan, once completed, will serve as a usable blueprint to City Council and various city departments for the growth and maintenance of our facilities. The project was originally approved as part of the 2020-2022 Capital Improvement Plan. However, the process was delayed until summer of 2022. In July, staff issued an RFP for consultant services for the development of the facilities master plan. There were 4 proposals received. After the evaluation of proposals, interviews with the teams, staff determined Group 4, with their team of sub-consultants, could provide the best value to the city. Group 4 has developed a number of facility master plans, including most recently the City of Elk Grove and the City of Palo Alto. As City Manager Benoon said, Group 4 might sound familiar as they were the consultant that conducted the Civic Center feasibility study in 2017. However, their selection for this project was determined on the merit of their proposal, their interview, and the team of experts they put together. Their innovative response to community engagement only cemented their selection for this project. Group 4 has partnered with Bureau Veritas, who will conduct a facility conditions assessment for each of the city-owned buildings, 10 Over Studios, public safety design professionals, Aquatic Design Group that specializes in aquatic facilities, and in fact, they have previous experience in our own Silliman Center, and TBD Consultants to provide an accurate budgeting and cost estimate support. As you can see, they've put together a very impressive team for the development of the city's first citywide master plan. The process and approach that will be used on this process is based off of Group 4's years of experience. There are 6 components to the project with some overlap. The first is the facility condition assessment. Bureau Veritas will evaluate the condition of each building, including the interior, exterior, roof, and all equipment and systems, and provide summary reports for each building. The future space needs. The consultant will evaluate the city's current staffing levels, current community programming, and future projections to determine the space needed at the current and future levels. Community engagement. There are 2 planned community engagement meetings in addition to online surveys. Staff will be working with the consultant to identify events and platforms to encourage public participation. At the first meeting, the consultant will present all information collected to date and hear from the community on what activities they feel are lacking and what facilities the city can renovate or build to host those activities. During the second community engagement meeting, the consultant will present some options based on the data collected in the community and staff input. These options will include maintenance of existing buildings, renovations, and new construction. They will also discuss and get feedback on funding options, including using the funds collected from Measure GG to fund additional community facilities. Alternative facility options. This will occur between the first and second community engagement meeting. The consultant will take the data collected from the facilities conditions assessment, the future space needs, and the first community meeting, and develop facility options, including a combination of renovation and new construction. They will complete cost estimates and develop an implementation plan for the recommended option and bring it to City Council for input and approval, and then again for the approval of the plan. This is a scheduled look at the components I just discussed in the previous slide. As you can see, the facility conditions assessment will begin before the end of the year and go into early spring, followed by the future space needs, which will happen through spring. And during that time, we will hold the first public engagement meeting, followed by the facility options late spring into summer, and that will include the second community engagement meeting. Cost estimates and implementation plan in both city council meetings will be in summer into early fall. Overall, the project is expected to take approximately 9 months. And now I would like to introduce Andrea Gifford, Principal in Charge and Project Manager from Group 4 Architects. She's been with Group 4 for over 20 years and specializes in public facilities and master planning to speak briefly about the project. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. Group 4, I'm representing Group 4, and we're thrilled to be here this evening, potentially working with the city again. As Roya mentioned previously, our successful work here on the Civic Master Plan really laid the foundation for not only the facilities adjacent to us, but the facility and room that we're in this evening. And we're confident that through working collaboratively, not only with your city staff, but also through our extensive community engagement process to come up with some needs, options, and a strategic implementation plan that will fulfill the needs of your city facilities for the next decade. So again, if you have any questions, we're here to answer those this evening. But again, thank you for your time and consideration.
Yep.
Thank you, Andrea. This concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, questions, anybody? Vice Mayor Hannon.
Thank you for the presentation. This is exciting for the city because we have a number of facilities throughout our city that are either not currently being used or are underutilized. So it's really an opportunity to engage the public to get an assessment as to what they believe are the needs of our community moving forward in terms of how we're going to use this space. I know there's a number of projects that I certainly would like to see in the community, possibly a new senior center, possibly a new event center for musicals and plays and things of that nature. Will that be part of the engagement process when you meet with the community, is to kind of get an assessment as to what they think are some of the needs of the community moving forward in terms of reutilizing some of this space?
Yes, the first community engagement will really get a feel for what the community needs, what the community wants. And the second community engagement meeting will provide options on how to meet those needs.
And my hope is that the financing for, or the finances for whatever the community has defined are critical needs of our community, that's not be a stumbling block moving forward. I'd like to use this almost as a blank canvas. This is what community says that they'd like to see have happen. Let the council and kind of worry with staff about where we're going to come up with the funding to be able to afford that. So I'm hoping that the financial side of it doesn't become a stumbling block for us moving forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Okay, would anybody in the audience like to speak on this item? Anybody? Nobody? Okay. Any other council comments? No. Ms. Harrington, anybody to speak on Zoom?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. I would, I guess, just add that in addition to the items that the Vice Mayor has mentioned, I think a general community event center is something that should be considered as well. But I'm sure down the road we'll get into that with the community engagement that's going to take place. So I just wanted to get that out there, that should be part of that as well. Okay, would somebody like to make a motion then?
Sure, Mayor. I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the contract with the caveat, and I think your point was well taken, that the center be kind of viewed as council is asking be included in any reuse or new construction of facilities in the city. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Ms. Harrington, will you take the vote?
Councilmember Bucci?
Aye.
Councilmember Collazo?
Aye.
Councilmember Freitas?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hannon?
Aye.
Mayor Nagy?
Yes.
Motion passes 5 ayes.
Okay, thank you.
Resolution of the City Council of the City of Newark authorizing the city manager to execute a contractual services agreement with Group 4 Architecture, Research, and Planning, Inc., and approving an amendment of the biennial budget capital improvement plan to provide additional funding for the citywide plan project 1274.
Okay, thank you. Next item, Please, Mr. Benoon.
Yes, good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. Item F2 is a recommendation from city staff for the city to enter into an agreement with Gale M. Goldman Associates. This is for the purpose of updating the city's 2001 Public Art Master Plan. This will follow a very similar type of community engagement process. The plan is 20 years old and is certainly in need of some update, and we do have funds and development impact fee to advance certain art projects. With that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to our administrative analyst, Ms. Roya Gonzalez, who will provide the staff report on this item as well. And I do note, I believe one of the consultants is appearing via Zoom this evening as well. So, Ms. Gonzalez, excuse me.
Good evening once again, Your Honor, members of the City Council. I'm pleased to provide you with an overview of the process for the Public Art Master Plan update. Staff went through a similar RFP process as the citywide facilities master plan and determined Gale M. Goldman Associates and Art Builds Community were well qualified to provide the services required for this project. The qualifications include decades of combined experience developing public art and cultural art and public and private art programming. In addition to the public art plans completed by each respective firm, Gale M. Goldman Associates and Art Builds Community have partnered together on public art plans for numerous municipalities, including the city of Palo Alto, and they are currently working together on a public art plan in the city of South San Francisco. Before we get into the process and schedule for this project, I'm going to review the background of the public art in Newark. In 1992, City Council adopted the Art in Public Places and Private Development Program, and not too long after, City Council established the Art in Public Places fee, which is a fee collected on all new residential units in commercial and industrial buildings and additions that are 10,000 square feet or more. One of the requirements of the program adopted in 1992 was to complete a public art master plan, which was completed and adopted by City Council in 2001. The plan includes 5 goals with multiple objectives within each. The most significant objective was the development of the 5-year public art project list. This sculpture you see in this picture, along with the entryway on Thornton and Cedar, were both projects listed in the 5-year plan. All public art using the Art in Public Places Fund, including temporary art, need to be defined in this project's list. The idea of painting utility boxes has come up, and when referred to the plan, we discovered that it was not on the project list. The plan is now more than 20 years old and in need of an update, which brings us to this project. Not only has the demographic of Newark changed in the last 20 years, but so has the idea of art. It's more than just sculptures and paintings. This update to the plan will allow us to reflect those changes. The project will begin in just a few weeks with a kickoff meeting in early December. During the first phase of the project, the consultant will review relevant city documents, meet with city staff to identify key stakeholders, and develop a detailed outreach strategy. The second phase will be the community outreach and public participation. At this stage, they will implement the outreach strategies outlined above. This will include focus groups, community meetings, and activity-based outreach events. Barbara Goldstein, founder of the Art Builds Community, will have the opportunity to speak about these activity-based outreach events in just a moment. During the final stage of the project, the consultant will develop and present the draft plan to staff and City Council for feedback before finalizing the plan, including the 5-year project plan. The update will also include recommendations on the administration of the public art program and include best practices on art procurement and maintenance. The overall project should take approximately 9 months. As I mentioned, Barbara Goldstein, founder of Art Builds Community and former public art director for the City of San Jose Office of Cultural Affairs, has joined us via Zoom and will provide a quick overview of activity-based outreach events to encourage community participation.
Hello, Honorable Mayor and City Council. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here this evening. The project that we're doing is the activity-based outreach that we do is basically an art project that we take out to places where people gather. We have found that people don't like to go to meetings, so we try to catch them where they already are, whether that is a marathon or a a community fair, an ice cream social. What we do is we commission an artist, hopefully someone from Newark or nearby, to create an activity that people that are at these events can participate in. It's a pop-up booth. The key to it, though, is that the activity that people are participating in is also giving us information about what it is that they're interested in. So, for example, we recently have done a project like this in South San Francisco where we share with people the different kinds of art that public art can be. And we ask them to take a piece of thread that is color-coded to that type of art and to weave it into a pattern so that when we get finished with the day, we have basically a data visualization of what people are interested in. Concurrently, we do mapping to show where there may be opportunities for public art to happen. We give people stickers and we ask them to mark where they would like to see art. So at the end of this process, we may do 4 or 5 pop-ups. It depends on what you have available and what's going on. We'll have a very good idea from ordinary people, people that don't necessarily go to daytime meetings, about what they want, what they value in public art in Newark, and what they would like to see.
Thank you. And with that, this concludes this presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Okay, first of all, would anyone like to speak on this item? No? Okay. Ms. Harrington, any requests to speak on Zoom?
No, Your Honor.
No? Okay. City Council have any questions? I just have one. When we're talking about art, are we also talking about the electrical panel boxes, the artwork on those? Okay,
Yes.
okay. Okay, other questions? Oh, Vice Mayor Hannan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Benoon, for bringing this item forward. I imagine there's a number of plans that we have that we've dusted off and are bringing forward. These were important to the community. They were certainly important back in 2001, and they're still important to us today. So thank you for bringing this item forward. Fees were collected to help fund these art projects. Is there currently a certain dollar amount that's in that account that we might be able to utilize for these projects moving forward?
That account is nearing $2 million.
Okay. Thank you. Again, appreciate bringing this forward. And I look forward to some of the projects that we will be developing in the city over the next year or two. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Okay, anybody else? Councilmember Collazo.
Not going up. There it goes. So my question is, are you guys going to give us some kind of idea of what things might be? My head's spinning in all kinds of directions, but you know, I'm excited. I'd like some feedback from everybody so I can kind of get an idea of what it is. But yeah, it's exciting. We need art. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, then would someone like to make a motion?
Second?
Okay. Ms. Harrington, will you please call the vote?
Councilmember Bucci?
An enthusiastic aye.
Councilmember Collazo? Aye. Councilmember Freitas?
Yeah.
Vice Mayor Hannan? Aye. Mayor Nagy?
Yes.
Motion passes 5 ayes.
Resolution of the City Council of the City of Newark authorizing the city manager to execute a contractual service agreement with Gale Goldman Associates, and authorizing amendment of the 2022-24 biennial budget capital improvement plan to provide funding for public art master plan update.
So we have $2 million. I think I'm going to become an artist. Okay, next item, Mr. Benoon.
Yes, good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. Item F3 is a recommendation from city staff to enter into a contract amendment with R3 Consulting Group. Mr. James Scanlon, our environmental services manager, will give that recommendation. Following that, we'll receive a report from the consultant from R3 Consulting Group, who will give a recommendation that the city consider and a potential expansion of the existing franchise agreement with Republic Services for the purpose of solid waste collection services. Their recommendation is to proceed with negotiations for a potential extension of that franchise agreement. So we're going to start off with Mr. Scanlon, who will address the first part of the staff report. Mr. Scanlon?
Thank you. Honorable Mayor, City Council, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll start off with the background on this item. So in 2013, after an extensive selection process, the city entered into a 10-year franchise agreement with Republic Services for the collection of solid waste and the the collection and processing of recyclable and organic materials and construction and demolition debris. This agreement expires on May 31st, 2023. In July of this year, the city entered into a contract with R3 Consulting Group, Incorporated, to review Republic Services' implementation of the existing agreement. And this evening, Rose Radford, the project manager from R3, is here to present the results of their findings and their evaluation. And again, staff recommends that the City Council authorize the city manager to execute a contract amendment with R3 to assist with contract negotiations on an extension to the franchise agreement with Republic Services. So with that, I'd like to introduce Rose Radford from R3.
Good evening. Forgive me, I'm gonna need to configure a little bit. So yeah, good evening. My name is Rose Radford with R3 Consulting. I'll give you a little context around our company. We work only in solid waste matters and only for cities and counties like you in their engagements with their haulers. So we worked with you, in the past, and we're excited about the opportunity to work with you in the future. This evening, I will be going over some of the details of our evaluation of your existing franchise agreement and the recommendation to proceed with extension negotiations. First, I'll start with some background. You've already covered some of that. I will discuss the general results of our rate survey. More detail is available in our report, which is attached to your agenda packet. Some details about what we would expect the future franchise agreement to look like, our evaluation of Republic's financial situation and the related impacts to the rates that we might expect, and then recommended next steps. So I will skip through some of the background that was already covered. I do want to note to you that there is a separate agreement with another company for transfer of garbage only. Republic does handle the end uses for the recycling organics and C&D, but the garbage is through a different agreement. You did have a very recent rate adjustment in 2020. So I was the primary analyst. I looked at Republic's finances, and essentially what we did is set your rates paid by your citizens equal to the cost of providing service according to Republic's books, along with a reasonable set profit. You should also just be aware that you are a member of a Joint Powers Authority, Stop Waste, which is Alameda County-wide, and Stop Waste does provide some related services in assisting your staff. There was a recent survey of residents that concluded that 75% of your residents appear to be either satisfied or very satisfied with Republic's performance. We are aware that there have been some customer service related considerations and concerns that have come up, especially around the COVID era. And just, I think a note on this is that actually is very common. That happened to all of the haulers, and I think a lot of other people as well. So just kind of a note on that before I proceed here. Your basic services are fairly standard. You have residential garbage, recycling, organics. For commercial, you have the same, but it's an opt-in process for organics. Organics, just as a reminder, means basically what you put in your green card at home. So that's yard trimmings, as well as food scraps and food soiled paper. So that's sort of a broad category. That material goes to a composting facility where it's turned into beneficial materials that are sold. You have bulky item pickups, which are quite generous. City events and city litter container services are free. Your containers are, in terms of color, meet the statewide standards. You have compressed natural gas trucks, which is industry standard. You have guaranteed capacity for organics and recycling, which I think is very important right now. And I'll get to that in a moment. You have a compost giveaway annually, and a full-time recycling coordinator provided by Republic to provide support to your businesses and residents in participating in the program. So beginning this year, there's a new statewide law, SB 1383. It's essentially a climate change law, and it targets methane emissions from landfills. So when organic material, which is what I just described to you, decomposes in a landfill environment, it releases methane gas. And the state has identified that as an important emission source that they would like to see reduced as much as possible. That means that they essentially pass down very specific programmatic requirements on all cities and really basically your haulers as well to meet statewide standards. It also includes some requirements for donation of edible food from certain businesses. So right now, you are coming up to the end of your franchise agreement with the Republic, and so you will need to make a decision about where you'd like to go next. I would like to say that contract extensions are very common, especially recently with a lot of legislative changes with SB 1383 and of course also the inflationary climate right now. Most cities really in your area and throughout the state have chosen to negotiate extensions rather than releasing an RFP for hauler services right now. Of the cities in the Bay Area that have released RFPs, it's quite common to see high cost increases right now. And that also relates to just available capacity for compost facilities and things of that nature. We did find that Republic's current rates and services are competitive and in some ways exceed industry standards. And also, moreover, I do want to note that Republic wants to extend with you. They've asked for it, and they'd like to extend for the next 10 years. So we did look at 6 other comparable communities. We selected these based on demographics and also service levels so that we don't have cities that have much better, worse services than you in here. We also selected 2 that have more recently extended agreements. 2 of them were competitively bid, 1 was extended. And you can see with the residential 32-gallon size, which is the most popular container size in Newark, you are vastly below. For the other residential container sizes, you are also lower than the average of the surveyed jurisdictions, although not as dramatically as for this size. For commercial, again, I'm just selecting the most popular container size, but this is a story that is represented in the other rates that we looked at as well. So you are toward the bottom end of the cost for the commercial 3 cubic yard once per week size. For commercial, your businesses do also need to pay for recycling and organic service. We looked at the cost for that. Your recycling is much lower than the other survey jurisdictions, not much, about this much lower. And for organic service, you actually are a bit higher than the other survey jurisdictions. So what would a extended franchise agreement look like? We would expect a 10-year term. That's standard with the way that the equipment depreciates over time. We would expect all current services to be retained, and it would be an exclusive agreement. We would suggest a few improvements and expansions on some aspects of your agreement. I do want to note that you're substantially already compliant with the current state standards. There's not a lot that is going to have to change. We do look at, as I mentioned, organic service is opt-in currently. We do recommend that not to be an opt-in. You could get a waiver if you don't want organic service, but really you do need to be provided service fairly promptly, because the state law does require everybody to sort out their organic waste. And that was passed by a municipal code update by the city already. We would add some additional standards around diversion, and in particular around reporting and compliance. We would like to see maybe some more beefed up requirements around things like customer service. And in order for your staff to monitor that, we would want to see more regular reporting on some of these things. And then also potentially to add performance reviews so that you can go back and Republic would pay for you to evaluate their performance on a more regular basis. And that would be for everything from regular collection activities to rates or the customer service, as I mentioned. On finances, I just want to remind you that we, as I mentioned, the detailed rate review was conducted only 2 years ago, so we did look at your finances already. And as I've also shown you, your current rates are competitive. We do know that there are a few additional costs since the last 2 years. We've got some accounts are not paying their bills, so Republic is holding some uncollected bad debt. They recently updated their labor agreement, and of course I talked about some agreement improvements which may cost some additional money. So we do recommend for council to authorize commencing negotiations with Republic to extend. We would like to come back to you at some point, hopefully toward the beginning of the new year, with an update. And of course, there will be opportunities for your feedback before we complete the agreement. And Jim, did you have anything to add there?
No, I don't think so. Thanks. Are you done?
So we
Oh,
do.
okay.
We do have a representative from Republic here as well, if you have any questions for me, for Joe, or for Jim.
Yeah, well, yes, thanks, Rose. And we do have Joe Chu, who's the general manager of the local branch of Republic Services, is with us, and he's here. He can answer questions as well. And with that, we'll open up for any questions or discussion, if you like.
Okay, was that in your presentation?
Yes.
Okay. So I'd like to ask anybody in the audience if they'd like to speak on this item. Anybody? Okay. Ms. Harrington, does anybody speak? Oops, yes, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Joe Chu. I'm the General Manager of the local Republic branch here that services Newark currently. Just want to thank you for the consideration for an extension. We've been proudly serving Newark for the last 10 years, and I have a eager group of drivers that are really passionate about serving Newark. And we look forward to hopefully negotiating a long-term deal here that'll bring a lot of value to the residents and businesses of Newark.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else like to speak on this in the audience? Anybody? Okay. Ms. Harrington, anybody on Zoom?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Council, maybe I'll start off with, I don't know how much of this is with the Republic Services, but there's a couple of items that I wrote down that's been something I've noticed recently. And that is it seems like the fast food locations in Newark do not have receptacles for the outside disposal of the trash and garbage that is generated from their sales. And I don't know if that's part of Republic Services, or if that's something that our staff should be aware of and have if we have any ordinances on that. But anyway, I've noticed that there's many of them that don't have these any place where people can put their trash if they buy products from them. The other thing is I've noticed that the overflowing bins in a lot of the commercial areas. It's one thing to have a bin that's full, but when a bin is overflowing, and that seems to be a situation with several businesses, is that continually the bins are overflowing. I don't know if that's because they've forgotten pickups, or whether it's too much garbage being created or what, but there should be some way. I mean, it's an unhealthy situation when the tops are off of these things because the garbage is stacked up 3 or 4 feet higher than what the bin allows. Anyway, I would hope that would be something that we could be looking at as well. And then with that, other comments by Councilmember Collazo.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. You mentioned about the composting and the gases that it let off. The other day, I had a customer that told me that she takes all her green waste from the kitchen and chops it up and spreads it around her plants. Now, is that a form of composting her stuff? Is that ethical? Does it create gases in her backyard?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's a big difference between bringing organic materials to the landfill where they're anaerobically decompose and release methane gases versus doing things like backyard composting, which is something you mentioned, or the composting program is currently for green waste is, bringing it to an industrial facility where it's essentially composted too, which does not release anywhere near the same amount of methane gas.
All right, so I have another couple of questions. Customer service, when I call Republic, it's really hard to get a hold of somebody. Sometimes you're on hold 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and I've timed it on my cell phone, when I need somebody. If I call JCPenney's or Macy's or something, it's because I'm a customer and I have a choice. But my residents here in Newark don't have a choice to call somebody else. It's Republic they're calling. And I think we need either where they can leave their number and have a callback, because some people don't have 40 minutes to sit there and, hold on to the phone and wait to speak to a person. That's happened a couple of times, maybe 3 times to me. And so I know it's happening to my residents. That's number 1. Number 2, if a customer calls and says they need to have their bin replaced or their garbage can, is that a cost to the customer or is that replaced for free?
Generally, that first would be free, and then after that, if you keep trying to change. But Joe, is that an answer that I'm not entirely certain?
Generally, yeah, no cost unless there's like damage to the bin.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, if it gets damaged, the wheels fall off or it corrodes. Let's say it's a restaurant and it's green waste. That green waste starts corroding the bottom of that metal bin.
Yeah, that's obviously not the customer's fault.
Speak in the microphone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In those cases, it's not the fault of the customer, so we'll replace that.
Okay.
Yeah,
No cost.
no cost.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor Hannan.
James, thank you for the report.
Oh, you're welcome.
Couple questions and comments on the SB 1383, where residents are going to be asked to put their organics into the green bin, which is, I'm fine with that. I'd like to see Republic provide homeowners with a small container that they can put in their kitchen for the collection of organics, so that they can take it out and put it in the green bin. It's kind of a constant reminder that we need to dispose of those organics properly. So I don't know if Republic currently provides those or not, but if they don't.
We were planning on providing them through Measure D. One of the items in the Measure D plan is kitchen pails. We put 15,000 in for this year, and we can do more in the future to get.
Make them cute.
I read in the staff report on uncollectible debts, it looked like there was a discussion about Republic wanting to reduce service. I don't want to see a reduction in service, Because undoubtedly what happens if people don't dispose of their garbage properly, it either becomes illegally dumped or it becomes a hoarding situation or something of that nature. James, does Republic currently have the ability to place a lien on a property for non-payment of garbage?
No, my understanding, and David can maybe speak to this more, I think he was here. Previously, prior to this contract, there was a process in place. I don't know if it was used, but the city, we did allow for liens, and then when this contract went into place, that was eliminated. So that's currently not an option that we have.
And Rose, do you know, do other communities use the lien process for unpayment of garbage bills? Are we unique in that regard that we don't allow that or permit that? Or do you know?
You're certainly not unique, and I don't think that lien process is used very heavily. However, there are some accounts that are very, very overdue, and that option isn't available to you currently to assist Republic in collecting those accounts. So I would say maybe about half of the communities still allow lien for garbage.
And I don't know, City Manager, if you want to comment on that, as whether or not there's pros or cons to that in terms of permitting that. I certainly would rather see that as an alternative than simply a reduction in service. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think staff would concur that there certainly is not a desire to see the accumulation of trash and debris and garbage and refuse throughout the city. By no means do we want to degrade the aesthetics of our city and invite any sanitation issues. In terms of collection for any outstanding debt owed to the waste hauler, we'd be happy to review that as part of our analysis and potential discussions with the waste hauler in the next few months. As you point out, there certainly are some pros and cons to that, and inserting the city as like the middle person for collections. There are some issues associated with that. We'd happy to review those and report back to the council, perhaps in the early part of the year when we do the follow-up report.
Thank you, I appreciate that. On the C&D, many communities charge deposits for construction and demolition debris, and then of course that deposit is returned once the company shows that they disposed of that C&D properly. Do we currently charge a deposit in Newark for C&D and then return it, or what's our position on C&D?
We are not currently doing that. We do have you brought this up before, we discussed this, and I spoke with someone who said there's some downsides to that because the cities get used to actually collecting the money rather than having the construction material be disposed of properly. So it's something we can look into. We've been looking into that as an option to deal with.
Great, and that's what I would ask, as we look at this 10-year possible renewal, maybe just look at that opportunity and option again, and I'll certainly defer to staff's recommendation on that down the road. The mayor talked about overflowing bins. Does Republic currently have the ability under the contract to increase the level of service if they determine that there's not adequate service resulting in overflowing bins?
We have under our ordinance, we have the ability to require if service is clearly insufficient, they can tag them and say, you have too much, you need to not have, your bin's overflowing, and city ordinance can require increased service if the service is not adequate.
Great, then I would certainly encourage Republic, and again, as part of this process, if we see overflowing bins, certainly on a consistent basis, that they notify the city of that situation and we increase the level of service, because as the mayor mentioned, it just becomes an eyesore for our community. The last question I have is, many of our commercial dumpsters have been graffitied throughout our community, and we do really the best we can to try to continue to beautify our community. What is Republic's stance on the replacing of bins that have been graffitied? Is that the responsibility of the customer, or whose responsibility is it to ensure that not only is the bin not overflowing with garbage, but it's contained in a manner that's not friendly to nearby other commercial properties?
Is it? Can you speak to that, Joe?
So current process is we rely a lot on our drivers because they're the eyes and ears out on the road. And they're seeing these bins a lot more frequently than anyone else. So current process is if they see damaged bins or graffiti bins, they report it and we start the replacement process.
Is there a cost in the commercial customer holder for the replacement of the graffitied bin, or does that Republic simply absorbs that cost in terms of replacing the bin?
Yeah, typically we are eating the cost right now.
Okay, I'll be honest with you. I don't see many bins that are replaced that have been graffitied throughout our community. And no disrespect to the drivers, because the survey that we did show that your company's doing an outstanding job at 75%, so you're to be commended for that. But I really would like to see the drivers be a little bit more proactive in advising you that these bins are graffitied, are unsightly, and should be replaced. Otherwise, I can ask the city staff to do that, but it's really your responsibility to do that as our customer. Thank you, Mayor.
Got it.
Are the bins numbered?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, other questions?
Well, Your Honor, I just
Yes.
wanted to hit up a little bit on the lien on the buildings. So if it's a renter that's living in a rented house and he's not paying his garbage and that lien goes towards the house, well, that's unfair for the person because that owns the home, because he's probably not even getting his rent paid either, so an extra cost to him, so that's a tough one. That's a really tough one.
You know the easy answer to that?
Kick him out.
No. To include the cost of the service in the rent.
But if they're not paying the rent, they're not gonna pay the cost of the service either.
That's true. But then it's your problem.
Thank you.
Your
other
Honor,
questions?
Councilmember Bucci would like to speak on this matter.
Yes, Councilmember Bucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one staff, as we kind of go with our analysis, I would like to see a cost analysis of opening this back up for bid as well. Obviously see the potential for cost savings and efficiency, just kind of doing moving forward with a contract extension, but an extension of another 10 years would be 20 years without going through a bid process. And I would be curious to also find out if there were any other haulers that also put forward any interest in possibly looking at putting in a bid for another contract. So I think it's important to continue to get open bids, and at 20 years is a big ask. I will say this, I think my colleagues touched on most of our concerns, but we've been recently getting some complaints from some folks in a church and, if the driver forgets to put the lock back on the bin and somebody's paying the lock fee to Republic, I think the Republic should be the one responsible to come back out and take anything that was illegally dumped, and it shouldn't be left to the church or to the client who, was paying the lock fee to doing it correctly in the first place.
Yeah, that's something we can definitely look at as we go through this.
Okay, it seems like a little thing, but it certainly is a big thing when you're a little church and you're out there and you go out and your dumpster is filled 3 or 4 days a week, especially with construction debris. I mean, that's the issue they've been having, and I do have a problem, the fact that Newark residents pay 3 times as much as Fremont resident for, such a thing as unlocking a lock. So certainly want us to include that with any discussions moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no more questions, there is a motion that is available for an ordinance. Anybody make the motion for resolution?
Yes, Mayor, I'll go ahead and make the motion that we approve the contract as proposed.
Okay. And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, then City Clerk, you take the vote.
Councilmember Bucci,
Aye.
Councilmember Collazo? Aye. Councilmember Freitas?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hannon? Aye. Mayor Nagy?
Yes.
Motion passes 5 ayes.
Resolution of the City Council of the City of Newark authorizing the city manager to execute the First Amendment to the contractual service agreement with R3 Consulting Group, Inc. for waste hauler franchise agreement negotiating services and amendment of the 2022-24 biennial budget and capital improvement plan.
Okay, thank you. Next item, Mr. Benoon.
Yes, good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. Item 4 is a recommendation from city staff for the council to approve a Newark Community Nonprofit Service Organization grant program. Before I pass it over to Mr. Cuevas for the staff report, I'd like to acknowledge and thank him. This was a collaborative effort between the Recreation Services Department as well as the City Attorney's Office and Finance Department. This program, if approved, would provide $300,000 in relief to Newark community nonprofit organizations. It would require a fair amount of effort from city staff to evaluate a very cogent application that was prepared, fairly cohesive, as well as require the city to enter into funding agreements with all these nonprofits and report the disbursement of funds back to the federal government. So a fair amount of work involved, and I thank everybody for their work that they have done and will do on this project. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Mr. Cuevas. He has a PowerPoint presentation for the council's consideration this evening. Mr. Cuevas?
Once it fires up, I'll send it out.
Okay. Good evening, Your Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. Thank you, City Manager Benoon, for the introduction. I will share a presentation on the Newark Community Nonprofit Grant Program tonight. After the presentation has concluded, I would be more than happy to answer any questions from council members. The City of Newark, the City Council allocated $300,000 towards the Newark Community Nonprofit Grant Program. As further explained tonight, many nonprofit agencies have been unable to raise funds due to the pandemic, and the pandemic has caused disproportionate impacts on specific segments of our community. Following the $300,000 allocation in the City of Newark ARPA plan, staff conducted a community needs survey and program research. The survey identified many organizations that support the Newark community that have suffered from the ongoing pandemic due to increased demand for services, lack of fundraising opportunities, and the desire to serve more Newark residents. Staff has developed a nonprofit grant program to address the community's needs based on the survey results received. This presentation provides an overview of the survey findings and summarizes a proposed nonprofit grant program for council consideration. In March 2022, Recreation and Community Services Department staff developed and issued a survey to identify the needs of nonprofit organizations that serve the Newark community. The department received over 30 responses from community groups with a proven history of providing services to the Newark community. The survey responses showed a need for funding to meet the growing needs of the Newark community. Here represents a summary of the types of organizations that responded to the department survey. We received responses from food pantries, counseling and human services, homeless services, emergency shelters, wildlife rehabilitation, community service organizations, performing arts organizations, historical organizations, cultural organizations, parent-teacher student associations, also known as PTSA, community sport organizations, and substance abuse providers in the community. Here represents a summary of what organizations would spend grant funds on if received from this program if approved. Enhance homeless shelter services, transportation and job readiness training capabilities, assist with historical organizations to preserve Newark's history, capital costs for animal shelter type organizations, provide additional funding to host local sport tournaments and clinics, including sports scholarships, job readiness training services for those who are low income or homeless needing additional assistance. Additionally, it would replace lost income to support youth, summer camps, school arts, community concerts, and meal programs within Newark. Here represents a summary of what organizations would spend grant funds on if received from this program, if approved. Community bike and safety equipment programs, career training for graduating high school seniors, and parenting workshops, fund community scholarships across multiple organizations for youth and low-income students, increase Newark's youth interest in STEM programming, cost for food pantry organizations, provide funding to continue a community voucher program to provide quick access to funds for clothing, food, and other necessities. And additionally, it would support a music program for youth and help offset facility rental cost. After evaluating the community survey results and reviewing similar regional programs, staff has developed a proposed nonprofit grant program that would address the community's needs and honor the spirit and intent of the ARPA legislation. Staff recommends investing these funds in projects that will align with strategic priorities, address community needs, support equitable outcomes for most impacted populations, leverage other funding sources, make the best use of this one-time infusion of resources, and have a lasting impact in our community. Staff also recommends nonprofits that have demonstrated history of successful programs. The following is an overview of the proposed program, including grant eligibility, selection process, and criteria reporting requirements. All applicants should meet eligibility and submit the required information to be considered for a funding recommendation. To be considered for funding, staff recommends that the applicants must submit a complete and responsive application, be a 501c3 nonprofit organization with recognized legal status equal under the United States Internal Revenue Code, submit a current W-9 request for taxpayer identification number and certification, serve Newark residents or businesses throughout their service or programs, have up-to-date business filings, including a business license and no outstanding taxes, be capable of administering grant funds in compliance with federal funding guidelines. Grants must be used for specific projects or services. To develop Newark's application process, staff conducted extensive research into similar programs, their scoring metrics, and general process, including information from the survey. The application is designed to assist applicants in providing the required information about their organization, eligibility, and proposal requirements to apply for grant funding. If City Council approves the program, staff will immediately provide the program application to all community nonprofits that completed the survey and advertise the program. A proposed grant application has been prepared and is attached to the staff report. Staff anticipates that the application period would be open for 30 to 60 days. After the application period closes, an ad hoc committee consisting of city staff members from various departments would review the proposals and score them based on the criteria identified on the next slide. In evaluating the community survey results and researching similar grant programs, staff recommends that grants be awarded in the range of $500 up to $25,000, depending on the needs of the organization and the strength of the application based on program criteria. Organizations will have 1 year from receiving funds to implement services and programs. Any funds not used after 1 year will be required to return back to the City of Newark. Staff would consider the following metrics when scoring applications. Grant funds should be used for specific projects or services. Grant funds should not be used for religious or political purposes. And so our program selection process and criteria, metrics considered when scoring, is a tangible impact, the extent of the benefit it benefit Newark residents would receive from the grant. Long-term impact, the long-term impacts of the proposed project service on the Newark community. Community needs, the project and service will reach populations that the pandemic has disproportionately impacted. Alignment, the project is aligned with the city's strategic plan goals. Leveraging, the project will leverage matching funds to expand the impact of the grant with grant funds already received from other organizations. Transformative change, the project will not be possible without grant funds. Organizational capacity, the nonprofits that have capacity and experience to implement projects, deliverables, and manage grant funds. The application packet is an easy-to-use document that provides information about the background of the program, an overview of the ARPA state and physical recovery funds, a tentative timeline, and information about one's eligibility and proposal requirements needed to submit a complete and responsive application. Included in the packet is information relating to the selection process and criteria, proposal submission information on deadlines, and where to seek or clarify questions about the program, including terms and conditions that the organization must agree to if awarded funds. If approved, the grant awardee would need to complete additional documents in addition to the application that includes a scope of work, grant agreement report, insurance requirements, and a W-9 request for taxpayer identification, and a verification of their 501c3 status. Any selected nonprofit organization would need to sign a grant agreement to receive grant funds. A grant agreement has been prepared in consultation with the city attorney and finance staff and was attached to the staff report. In summary, the grant agreement awards the funds to the nonprofit, requires the nonprofit organization to use the funds for a specific purpose within an agreed upon time period, generally 1 year. Also, the organization would be required to indemnify the city, require the organization to maintain appropriate insurance for their program, and require the organization to regularly report the expenditures of grant funds to the city of Newark. The agreement also requires the organization to return funds to the city if they are not used within that time established or if the organization violates the terms of the agreement or ceases operations. Awardees will be required to provide monthly qualitative and quantitative reports detailing how funds are used. The information provided will be reviewed by the finance department and included in the quarterly state and local funds recovery funds compliance report submitted to the U.S. Department of the Treasury. If this grant program is approved by council, city staff will immediately advertise the program application, hold a 30 to 60-day application period, and immediately review applications upon receipt. The goal is to have grants issued no later than 120 days after council approval. Finance staff will require grant awardees to sign an agreement and report on how funds were spent by the 15th of each month. Awardees will have 1 year from the date of the signed agreement to spend funds received by the city of Newark. All remaining funds not spent within the designated 1-year window must return to the city of Newark within 30 days. Okay. There is no physical impact to the city's general fund associated with this item because the existing budget includes the City of Newark's ARPA recovery plan, which includes $300,000 in funding for this program. The proposed resolution amends the 2022-2024 biennial budget and capital improvement plan for fiscal year 2023. And that concludes my presentation for you tonight. If you guys have any questions, I'd be more than welcome to answer them for you.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we start with if anybody in the audience has any comments on this they'd like to make? Anybody? Nobody? Okay. Ms. Harrington, anybody on Zoom?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. And our council. Maybe I'll start with, first of all, thank you, Mr. Cuevas, for a very extensive and fine job on putting this together. I know it's not easy to do something like this, but, and I really do commend our city and the council for allocating the $300,000 to the Newark nonprofits. You know, I kind of think of Newark as kind of the volunteer city, and these organizations, I think, do a lot in our community. And, you know, the COVID pandemic kind of, you know, hit them as well as it hits everybody else. And, you know, this will, I think, will allow them to kind of regain their footing, if you will, and continue on. The one question I have, and it doesn't have to be answered tonight, but just something to consider, is that I noticed that the reference is made to the 501c3. And a 501c3, I believe, is a category for with the federal government of a nonprofit charitable organization. And when organizations get a 501 ruling, they can either be a C3, they could be a C4, they could be a C8, and you know, some of them are, if they're like for literature and things like that. So I want to make sure that the intent is that this is only for 501c3 organizations and not the other varieties of 501 organizations.
Yes, Your Mayor. 501c3 organizations are commonly referred to as charitable organizations. To be tax exempt under the 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, an organization must be organized and operated exclusively for exempt purposes set forth in Section 501c3, and none of its earnings may incur to any private shareholders or individuals. One of the things that we will do through the application process is extensively look at the application to ensure that the organizations that are applying for funding are the true recipients in the spirit of the ARPA legislation. Okay. So we will be working with individuals, and then if any organizations have questions, we will also assist them in looking at their materials to make sure that they qualify or not.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, other questions? Councilmember Collazo.
Thank you, Your Honor. So what a wonderful thing to do for these organizations. But I have a question. Now, you said that you would open it up to organizations that filled out the questionnaire. What about organizations that didn't hear about it and didn't fill out the questionnaire?
That is an excellent question. After we submitted the initial survey to the community, we opened it up for a 2-week viewing period and received about 30 plus responses. After that survey closed, we received an additional about 20 additional respondents as word is getting out in the community. So we've been creating an extensive list to ensure that organization that contacts us that is interested receives the correct information when this program is approved. And also we will be working on an extensive community outreach program through our social media channels, our email, just to get the word out, and then also visiting certain areas and putting out signage so people are aware as well. And so we want to ensure that everyone gets an equal opportunity to submit an application to this grant program, and that's why we're also submitting it now to a 30 to 60-day period to give more time for individuals to apply.
That's very kind. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Vice Mayor Hannon.
Yes, thank you for the report, Nick, and I want to echo both the mayor and Councilmember Collazo's comments, and Mr. Benoon to you as well. We, the city, have done a phenomenal job of making sure that the ARPA money that we've received was spread throughout our community, and continue to look at opportunities to make sure that those most vulnerable in our community are given the resources and the assistance necessary as they try to transition out of this pandemic. So real credit to city staff for coming up with innovative ways to give back to the community. A couple suggestions. You mentioned a couple times 30 to 60 days. It should be one or the other, and I would suggest 60 days so that it's clear, you know, that what the application process looks like. You mentioned for religious and political purposes, which I certainly understand, but that doesn't take away a religious organization that provides benefit to the community from providing for applying for grant funds to continue to help the community. Am I correct in that assessment?
That's correct. As long as the organization is organized under 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code and they're eligible to receive those funds, yes, they could certainly apply to the extent they have a non-religious purpose and providing support to the community. of course, they can apply, absolutely.
Is the leveraging required? You mentioned that they need to leverage, and I'm assuming you mentioned that they need to leverage the funding equal to the amount that we were going to award in the grant. Did I hear that correctly?
One of the things that we're looking at for leveraging funds is right now in the community, not in just Newark, but also Alameda County, there are multiple competing grant programs. So we would be looking at organizations that are able to leverage our grant funds with another received grant fund. So say if an organization received up to $25,000 with us and they already received $25,000 for a combined total of $50,000, we would look at that as seeing it's more impact for the Newark community because they are now able to do more services based on their funding received. And so we would look at that as a potential mechanism to see if they potentially qualify for a grant award.
Great program, Mr. Benoon. Again, appreciate your thoughtfulness in bringing these items before us. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, any questions? No.
No, Your Honor.
Okay, then let's see. We did all of that. Okay, if somebody want to make a motion? We're at that point. Okay. Okay. And City Clerk, would you take the vote?
Councilmember Bucci?
Aye.
Councilmember Collazo? Aye. Councilmember Freitas?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hannon? Aye. Mayor Nagy?
Yes.
Motion passes 5 ayes.
Resolution of the City Council of the City of Newark approving the Newark Community Nonprofit Services Organization Grant Program for Newark-based or Newark-serving nonprofits and authorizing a budget adjustment to the biennial budget 22-24 for fiscal year 23 to fund the nonprofit grant program from the American Recovery Plan Act revenue.
Okay, next item, Mr. Benoon.
Yes, good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. Item F, combined presentation from city staff and some of the city's consultants. This is in regards to the TOT, transient occupancy tax, popularly known as the hotel tax. The city currently has a TOT rate of 10%. That's applied to all the hotel rates for all rooms rented throughout the city. If the council may recall, when we adopted the previous budget in the middle of the pandemic, we certainly didn't have the best of projections in terms of TOT. That was a bit of very difficult to predict. As we waited through the pandemic, the decline in revenue from TOT rebounded and in fact sharply. So tonight we're going to have a presentation that will begin with Ms. Kristen Lee, who will provide an overview of the city's receipt of TOT, looking back at the 10-year history, as well as some projections going forward. Following that, our Community Development Director, Mr. Stephen Turner, will provide a brief update on the status of the hotels situated in the city of Newark, including one site that was entitled Tuesday Night by our Planning Commission. Following that, our Economic Development Manager will provide background in terms of who's staying at Newark hotels, and she will introduce hotel consultants who will provide a report on hotels in Newark and the revenue that we are currently receiving. With that, I'm going to pass it over to our Finance Director, Ms. Lee, who will begin the presentation and provide us an update on receipt of TOT revenue. Ms. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager Benoon. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Council members. I'm Kristen Lee, Finance Director. Tonight, staff will be presenting an informational item on Newark's transient occupancy tax. And this report is a collaboration of the Finance Department, Community Development Department, and the hotel industry experts, Mark Keller and Sandra Storm, who's actually here with us tonight. They are both principals from the Embarcadero Hospitality Group. Just a quick rundown of tonight's agenda. I'll begin the presentation with an overview of TOT and the current ordinance, followed by a brief revenue update. Next, our Community Development Director, Mr. Stephen Turner, will provide an update on Newark's hotel developments. Then our Economic Development Manager will introduce the fourth segment of tonight's presentation, and the Embarcadero Hospitality Group will present their analysis of Newark's hotel market. Lastly, we will cover the next steps and answer any questions that the council may have. So transient occupancy tax, otherwise known as TOT, the hotel tax or a lodging tax, is imposed on occupants staying 30 days or less in any overnight lodging facility. Hotel guests actually pays the tax for the overnight stay, and hotel operators are required to collect and remit the tax to the city. Most of our hotels remit monthly, but we do have a few that remits quarterly. The tax is authorized under California's Revenue and Taxation Code 7280 and 7281. This authorizes the city, which is a general law city, to levy a tax on the privilege of occupancy of less than 30 days. Local ordinances can set the rate and terms with voter approval, and the current tax rate in Newark is 10%. This rate was approved by voters and increased from 7.5 back in November of 2001. Excuse me. I'm just gonna take off this. When? November 2001. So other than increasing rates, cities have been updating ordinances to include short-term rental compliance and collections from online booking services. Our ordinance was last updated in August of 1979. And there are a few exemptions. A federal, state, or officer on official business and any officer or employee of a foreign government are exempt from this tax. This pie chart here is based on our fiscal year 2020 results. The TOT now makes up 6% of the general fund revenues, whereas pre-pandemic, the percentage was closer to 10%. During the May budget update, I had reported that tourism picked up, but business travel was still lagging, and Newark's TOT is more dependent on business travel customers. At the time, occupancy levels were approximately 62%, which was still significantly lower than the pre-pandemic levels of 81%. The good news is that fiscal year 2022 ended with a 7% higher than anticipated results. This graph here illustrates a 10-year historical and a 5-year forecast of Newark's TOTs. The economic recovery after the Great Recession began in fiscal year 2012, and this had a positive impact on our hotel room occupancy. Revenue growth was trending steadily upward year over year due to a combination of higher occupancy levels and higher room rates until fiscal year 2020. Sharp declines were experienced in fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2021, and this was due to the statewide shelter-in-place directive in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. City TOT revenues dropped from approximately $7 million per year in fiscal year 2019, which was a pre-pandemic year, to slightly under $3 million per year in fiscal year 2021. The Newark hotel market, although recovering, is still far from pre-pandemic occupancy levels and room rates. Industry experts are predicting between 10 to 18% increases statewide, and this is for fiscal year 2023. But the Bay Area is still lagging, and it's clear that remote and hybrid work is the new normal, which leaves business travel trends still unpredictable. And therefore, my projections are still conservative for fiscal year 2023 and 2024. So for fiscal year 2023, I'm forecasting a 7.3% increase from the previous year's actuals and another 4.5% for fiscal year 2024. Then in the out years, more normal levels of growth at 3.2%. So though business travel trends are unpredictable, there is optimism on the horizon. Our fiscal year 2020 actual revenues came in 30% higher compared to fiscal year 2021 and 7% higher compared to what we budgeted. This concludes my segment of the presentation, and now I would pass the presentation to our Community Development Director, Mr. Stephen Turner.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. I'm Stephen Turner, your Community Development Director. As you know, Newark has many fine hotels, and you'll hear an inventory of those hotels later on in the presentation. But I wanted to highlight two hotels in particular that staff has been reviewing over the years. That would be new hotels to our inventory. The first hotel to provide an update for you about is the Marriott AC Hotel. This is anticipated to be an upscale branded hotel at the intersection of Ballantyne Drive and Maury School Road, and would occupy the site that is currently occupied by Restaurant Nijo Castle. It will contain 132 rooms, have 96 parking spaces, can have a banquet hall, restaurant, and a fitness center. And I'm happy to provide you with the information that the Planning Commission approved this hotel at their regular meeting on Tuesday. So we're looking forward for building permits to be submitted soon so that they can begin construction and have a new hotel within the city. Next slide, please. A previously approved hotel, the Hyatt Place Hotel, is nearing construction. The expectation is that the hotel will be open at the end of this year with room reservations beginning in February of next year. So it's very near to completion. Again, this will be another upscale branded hotel, and this is on John Muir Drive facing 880. This will be a little bit smaller of a hotel, 112 rooms, but will contain a restaurant, a lounge, market, a fitness center, and an indoor pool. There'll be about 2,000 square feet of flexible meeting space. And again, as I mentioned, this is projected to open in December with rooms rented out in February. So that concludes the overview of the two new hotels coming in. I wanted to provide just an update on a hotel site that Council issued entitlements for a number of years ago in our Bayside Newark TOD area. In September of 2017, Council approved a hotel within the Bayside Newark TOD area at the corner of Willis Street and Enterprise. And that was a 146-room hotel with a ground floor retail area of about 8,300 square feet. That had very typical amenities as the other hotels, including an outdoor pool, lounge areas, restaurant, and meeting room areas. Entitlements were granted for our standard 24-month period. Near the end of that period, the applicant asked for an extension of those entitlements, and the city granted that for another 24 months with an expiration in September of 2021. As we got towards the end of that expiration, it was determined that the owner and developer did not submit building permits and no building permits were issued. So in September, those entitlements expired. And in order to have bring a new hotel to that site, they would have to go through the process again. The site was transferred to a new owner recently, and that new owner has submitted a preliminary review application, not for a hotel, but for a residential condominium project with ground floor retail. So that would be about 132 residential units and about 12,000 square feet of ground floor retail. We've reviewed that on a preliminary basis. We've provided our comments to the applicants, and the next steps would be for the property owner to submit a formal application to the review for the review of the city. However, it's unlikely that we will see a new hotel come to that site. That site will likely be changed over to residential. So that's an update of three kind of recently considered sites, hotel sites within the city. At this point, I'd like to bring the presentation back to our Economic Development Manager, Ann Stedler, who will introduce our consultants and the rest of the program for tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to introduce the consultant team who is with us tonight. Sandra Storm and Mark Keller are principals of their firm, Embarcadero Hospitality Group. Their consulting practice includes market analysis as well as advisory services for hotel development and hotel operations for both private and public sector clients. In addition to their consulting work, our consultants have developed and currently operate hotels. The Embarcadero Hospitality Group has monitored the Newark market since 2017. Their industry expertise plus their familiarity with Newark is excellent preparation. Therefore, tonight they will explain Newark's hotel performance and market dynamics within the context of our region. Mark and Sandra, welcome.
Thank you for the introduction, Anne, and good evening, Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members. This is Mark. Yeah. I'm Sandra, this is Mark. We're really pleased to be here this evening and have the opportunity to share our analysis on Newark's hotel market with you. It was really fun and interesting data to dig into, and encouraging because of really the fundamental strength of the Newark hotel market and some of the resiliency that it's shown, especially as compared with some of the other Bay Area markets. The slide in front of you is what we're going to cover in our part of the presentation. So we're going to do a deep dive into Newark hotels market. We're going to look at pre and post-COVID hotel performance. We're going to look at Newark's hotel performance as compared to other nearby markets. And then we're going to look at transient occupancy tax rates and how Newark compares to nearby markets in terms of its rate. And then we'll consider some next steps, share some potential opportunities in terms of where we go from here. So diving into Newark's hotel market pre-COVID. So Newark had a very strong hotel market prior to COVID, and it was growing at a faster rate than most US hotel markets due to a number of factors. One is that Newark is a very strong business class market, and that's due in part to the many high-tech and other companies located in Newark and Fremont, as well as major high-tech companies like Meta, Google, and Apple that are in the greater region. So across the Dunbarton Bridge and nearby, there's a lot of occupancy or hotel stays that are generated when you have that kind of office space and that kind of activity. Newark has a great location in terms of convenience to cities throughout the Bay Area, as well as the 3 major airports. And so that is another reason that it has performed so well historically. And then proximity to San Francisco. San Francisco has traditionally been one of the top hotel markets in the world, both from a leisure and business perspective. And then the proximity to San Francisco and San Jose's convention center, and the what we would call overflow occupancy that's generated from those, meaning that when those big events happen, it puts pressure on all of the hotel rooms, and so people stay further and further out from those points of interest. So next we want to take a look at the impact of COVID-19 on hotel markets generally. So COVID really was an unprecedented event for hotels in the US. We're going to take a look at the national impact, the regional impact, and then how Newark compares. So taking a look at the national hotel market, we all probably remember March of 2020 that travel really halted. So there were some effects, the hotels were seeing some impact on occupancy even prior to March 2020, but in March 2020, everything halted. And this was due in part to government travel restrictions, as well as people's personal preferences not to travel and fears of safety around traveling, and then a lot of companies also having their own internal policies against travel. So what you can see in the chart here is that you can see 2020 and 2021, and we have a percentage of what the revenue, occupancy, and average daily rate were in 2019 pre-COVID. So you can see in 2020 that revenues were 52% of what they had been in 2019. Occupancy was 67%. The average rate was 79%. And then you can see in 2021, significant improvements, but still far behind what the revenue had been in 2019. For context, the most significant decrease in revenue previous to COVID had been in the 2009 recession. And that had been seen as just as a huge event for the hospitality industry, and that had been about a 17% reduction. So for context, in 2020, it was nearly 50%. Looking forward in 2022, projections anticipate a return to 2019 revenues for the U.S. market, but that will actually be in 2025 when adjusted for inflation. And a quick mention here in terms of occupancy rate and revenue. Something to note is that when you have high occupancy, you tend to have higher rates because that high occupancy is putting pressure on the rate and increasing those rates. So when you have lower occupancy, you're typically seeing a lower rate and therefore an overall lower revenue. So looking at the regional market, the Bay Area has fared worse than the national market as a whole when you look at COVID. And this is due in part to, again, that high concentration of high-tech headquarters and business travel that halted and stopped. Conventions and special events also stopped, and those had been a big source of hotel revenues. There was then also a stopping of foreign and domestic leisure travel that had been significant for the Bay Area previously, and then some relocations of high-tech workers away from the Bay Area because of the ability to work remotely or because of some headquarters deciding they want to be less in the heart of an urban area. And we don't know how permanent some of that is, but it has been an impact temporarily at least. So taking a look today at where the Bay Area is as it compares to the regional market, it is still faring worse than the national market. But some context for that, when I say worse, what I'm talking about is the percentage of 2022 versus 2019. What's true is that the Bay Area has always had a very high rate, and the rate in the Bay Area continues to be much higher than a lot of rates throughout the country. So we're talking about comparative restoring from 2019 to 2022. For context, Silicon Valley is outperforming San Francisco proper, but still well behind the national levels. And there are some long-term impacts, as we've alluded to and Kristen spoke about what is the impact for business travel long-term. Some of that is still unknown. We don't know if exactly how the remote working trends are going to play out. And so now taking a look at Newark specifically, we did pull what's called a STAR report. So Smith Travel Research is a company for whom most hotels and all branded hotels report their performance to. And we're able to pull reports of sets of hotels to get their data. So that's very helpful for analysis. And so we pulled a report for business class hotels in the Newark market, and we compared those with reports that we pulled from the Fremont Milpitas area, Mountain View Cupertino, and then Palo Alto Menlo Park. And again, we selected business class hotels from all of those markets so that we could kind of compare apples to apples.
And at this point, it would make sense that you would wonder why in the world would you pick Palo Alto Menlo Park and Mountain View Cupertino as opposed to, say, Hayward and San Leandro or Union City. And the reason is that Newark has a very unusual and strong collection of business class hotels. And so, for example, Hayward has just a few that would be considered business class. And when we see the census of Newark hotels, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But truly, you have a very, very strong collection of business class hotels, and that's why we picked those others. We'll explain that as we go.
Yeah, and so the performance measures that we looked at were occupancy, the average daily rate, and then the combination of the two, which in the industry we call RevPAR, but that's revenue per available room. So basically the amount of money that the hotel operator is getting for each room every night, whether it's occupied or not. And so here we're doing a comparison of these markets, and we're taking a look at occupancy. We have up on this graph 2019, 2020, and then 2022 year to date, which is actually looking at a 12 months trailing from through the end of September when we pulled this data. And so you can see 2019, that all of the markets have a pretty strong occupancy. For comparison, the national average in 2019 was 66%. So you can see that these markets are all performing well with those high percentages. And then if you take a look at 2020, you can see how resilient really Newark was compared with these other markets. Newark dropped kind of about a third, whereas some of the markets like Fremont, Milpitas dropped, over half. And then you can carry it through in 2022 and see that Newark is still outperforming Fremont, Milpitas, and really competitive with the other markets there. So here we're looking at the average daily rate. And so looking at 2019, you can see the kind of the picture there. Newark and Fremont Milpitas are kind of more similar than the other two in terms of where they started. And then again, you see a kind of resiliency with Newark. Yes, it dropped significantly, but it didn't see the drop that some of the other communities have seen. And then it's staying strong going into 2022. Advance. And then this is that RevPAR term that I was talking about that is the most important number for hoteliers. It's the revenue per room each night, whether it's occupied or not. And you can see how Newark performs there. Again, it's, in our perspective, really a story of resilience, even though the impact has been significant.
So take a look at Newark, if you go back to that slide just a moment. Take a look at Newark versus Fremont Milpitas in 2019. And you see that Newark very slightly outperforms Fremont Milpitas by $5 there. But then in 2020, it's almost 150% of the revenue per room that Fremont and Milpitas had. Even though, of course, it was a pretty catastrophic drop, it shows a tremendous resilience for Newark. So you can continue on to the next slide.
Yeah, and then this slide here is looking at, again, the percentage of revenue compared to 2019. And here we've broken it down by 2020, 2021, and then 2022 for the last 12 months through September 2022. And so here, again, you really see that picture of how Newark has been resilient. If you look at 2020, Newark was 49% of the 2019 revenue, whereas you can take a look at the other markets. In 2021, Newark continued that trend of really outperforming those other markets, being at 48% versus the others, 48% of 2019. And then in 2022, you see Newark coming up to 63% of 2019. And you'll notice that uniquely, Palo Alto Menlo Park has started to resurge in terms of the percentage of revenue there.
And generally speaking, if you look on the other side of the Dunbarton Bridge, if people had their choice of staying any place, all other things being equal, generally their first choice is Palo Alto Menlo Park. Concentration of restaurants, proximity to all kinds of businesses and Stanford University and so on. So that's not something that's unexpected.
So why this resiliency? What's happening there? For some context, in 2019, Newark added 2 new hotel rooms, and as a percentage of the total rooms, that was quite significant. It was more than in those other markets. There was more supply in 2019 than in those other markets, and yet it still outperformed its competitors during COVID. And our analysis says this is due to a couple of things. One is the convenient location. Again, Newark being really centrally located and able to get to lots of points of interest. The new and expanded businesses near Newark. So even though we've all gone through COVID and the experience of this, there have been new businesses coming in Newark and near Newark. Newark's hotels cost less than many other options, so it's a great value proposition for people looking for a place to stay. And more of Newark's hotels have extended stay features. And so they've been able to, that type of property is very appealing for business travelers, and especially during COVID for people who didn't necessarily want to go out and cook. They could prepare food in their room, and they're more comfortable for more extended stays, which were happening more during COVID versus just transient kind of overnight stays. And then Newark is perceived as a nicer, safer place to stay. I mean, there's all these great projects that we heard about earlier in the day, and restaurants that people can walk to, and better options than other Bay Area options at similar price points. And so building on that, looking at this post-COVID recovery period, some of the strengths, this recent expansion in biotech and electric vehicles and other industries, you can see all the companies up there. Newark has done a tremendous job at recruiting these businesses to locate in Newark with almost 1.8 million square feet of industrial building area, these have a direct impact on hotel occupancy. These are the kinds of businesses that generate hotel stays for workers who are colleagues who live in other parts who come, vendors who come, customers who come, so they really generate a lot of occupancy. Newark is going to have these attractive new hotels, which is really exciting. Those often draw people. If you have a loyal Marriott customer, when a new Marriott, the new AC comes into town, they're going to want to check that out. So those are great strengths that Newark has.
And specifically Hyatt Hotels, it has not had one of their hotels in the market and now will. And there are lots of people that are very loyal to the big brands. And so that will bring additional customers into Newark that haven't been here in a while.
Yeah, and so some, again, opportunities during this post-COVID recovery, as we're talking about the potential to add more industry, the fact that Newark's been successful in recruiting that business, that's an opportunity and very positive, and the potential to attract more leisure travelers. With Newark having so many great restaurant options, again, having a strong location, having private event spaces where people can hold weddings and family reunions and work events, shopping, and proximity to outdoor recreation like bike trails and the Don Edwards Wildlife Refuge. These are all things that are, I think, great opportunities for Newark to really sell itself for some of the leisure, as well as what we like to call bleisure, which is business travelers who travel for business but tack on a couple extra days to check things out, to have fun. And so some post-COVID recovery challenges that we see, having the new hotels entering into the market, that is going to dilute the revenue per hotel for a period of time. That's typical when new supply comes in, but that may be exaggerated with the ramp-up period, the fact that Newark still isn't recovered to post-COVID. Some of the challenges that Meta has faced as it's transitioning into kind of a new environment post-COVID, and then delay of the Dumbarton Railway Bridge project, which we anticipated would kind of open up access and drive more occupancy to Newark. And then overarching, just this dependency on business travel. It used to be such a coveted aspect of any hotel to have, strong business travel, and to that to really be the driving force behind occupancy. But with COVID and with changes in the way people do business, it creates some vulnerabilities, I would say, for for Newark's hotel market. So now we're going to take a look at transient occupancy taxes, as well as some other economic benefits to cities when you have strong hotel performance. So what we have here is basically just a snapshot of the current hotel inventory in Newark.
And this is really represents what we were speaking about earlier, an enviable and highly unusual collection of hotels, because if you look to the far right, you will see upscale, 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 and so on. One economy hotel and one upper mid-scale hotel. And just for reference, the hotel industry, and why do we call it an industry, I don't know, but there are the following segments. There's economy hotels, self-explanatory, mid-scale hotels, upper mid-scale hotels, upscale hotels, and then there are upper upscale and luxury hotels above that. And business class hotels are mostly in the upscale range. And to have this many upscale hotels is almost unique. I've almost never seen that before. Even in Palo Alto and Mountain View and so on, because of the main road there, El Camino Real, you have quite a number of budget hotels intermixed with all these, upscale hotels and so on. So this is really a testament to Newark's ability, both because of accidents of geography in the first place, but then really proactive business development on the part of many of you and your predecessors of attracting great businesses. So this is something to really be proud of, number one. Number two, I just want to mention that many of you will notice that the Town Place Suites is not on here, and as you're well aware, It's ceased normal overnight operations in preparation for its likely residential future. So you have basically 4 new hotels, if you count 2 in 2019 and the 2 that are on the horizon now, but with the subtraction of 1. And so think of it as basically three new hotels in the market. But with even with all of the downturn with COVID, it's really interesting to note that, for example, they're proceeding with the one that was just approved. And that shows the industry's recognition of everything that we're talking about. You may not have been aware of this, but the hotel industry writ large loves Newark for very understandable reasons.
Well, and just a note of, again, the number of extended stay product is also really notable, and that is also a helpful thing in terms of occupancy because people come and they stay longer. And so, yeah, you can advance, Kristen. And then we're just taking a look at those 2 new properties that are coming in, 242 additional rooms, and that upscale class, as Mark was pointing out. So what we're looking at here is an overview of transient occupancy tax rates in nearby cities. Now, we couldn't select every single city in the Bay Area, so what we tried to do was pick markets that were close by, as well as markets that, from the customer's perspective, had had similarities in terms of the hotel market. So again, looking at markets where there's a lot of business class hotels, and having elements that are maybe similar to Newark, as well as just picking some of the big cities as a comparison. You'll note that there's a range from 10% on the lower end all the way up to 16.25% for San Francisco. And just a little bit of context here is that some cities like San Francisco and San Jose, they maybe have a base rate. In the case of San Francisco, it's 14%, but then they tack on some additional fees, for example, to fund the convention center. So we took that total amount that the customers charged, and that's what you see here.
Right, and we just thought we'd mention that in general, the trend is upward. You can see your neighbors, Union City at the bottom. Fremont is the outlier with you at 10%. But to give a little bit of context, even Hayward has now been authorized by the public to increase to 14%. They haven't yet implemented that, but they've been authorized to do that. And so essentially, you're not in a competitive disadvantage to do 14%. We're not entirely sure why Fremont has remained at 10% while others have gone up, but we've done a pretty intensive study of these markets when the information was readily available.
Yeah, and then if you head to the next one, because this is relevant. So these markets were all on the ballot for an increase. Was it 2 days ago?
A few days ago.
Yeah, and I know Mark just looked at the status.
Yeah, we weren't sure that they would be clear as to whether they would won or lost, but the report is that the Alameda measure won by between 10 and 11% margin, and the Belmont and Millbrae passed by over 3-1, so about 79% yes vote in each case.
And go ahead and advance. And so what we're doing here is an experiment looking at what would it look like if Newark's TOTs were at higher rates. And so we wanted to take a pre-COVID year to get kind of a full picture, as well as a projected fiscal year 2023. So if you look at fiscal year 2019, at the existing 10% rate, about $6.7 million was collected. If that were to increase to a 12% tax, it would have been about $8.04 million, or a difference of $1.3 million. And then if it were to increase to 14%, you would see a total collection of about $9.4 million, with the difference being about $2.7 million. And then if you look at the projected fiscal year 2023, and that's using the numbers that Kristen showed earlier, if it were to go from 12% from 10%, instead of 3.8, that would be 4.56, a difference of $760,000. If it were to go to 14%, that would be 5.3 with a difference of about 1.5. And so there, when we think about the economic benefits of hotels, I think many of us think first of TOTs because those are such a significant contribution that hotels make. But there are other economic benefits for having a strong and vibrant hotel market in the community. Hotel guests in the U.S. spend an additional $1.22 for every dollar that they spend on their hotel bill. And this was an extensive study that was done in 2019 by Oxford Economics. So a kind of real world way of thinking of that is that if you spent $200 on your hotel room rate, you're going to spend $244 in the community. And that doesn't include transportation, and it doesn't include any gaming or casino activity that some hotels have. So that's solely on restaurants, shopping, and services in the community. It gets higher when you start accounting for the gaming and the transportation. Another aspect of hotels is they really do help attract businesses. A lot of folks, the businesses that are looking to locate, having a nice hotel for their customers, for their workers, for their vendors to stay is an important part of the evaluation. And then hotels generate jobs during construction and ongoing hotel jobs. They're also a great opportunity to feature local artists, to work with local vendors. So they're great in terms of those elements. So what we wanted to do here is show kind of the sensitivity and the difference for the city and the TOTs collected based off of the performance of the hotel. And so this is a completely hypothetical hotel, just a 100-room hotel, and we wanted to show what it looked like when the performance of the hotel changed. And so with a hotel that is doing 75% occupancy with a $120 rate and has an annual revenue of 3.3, you can see that the TOTs at 10% collected from that one property is about $329,000. If that hotel is performing at 90% occupancy, which is very high post-COVID, but at 90% occupancy with $140 average rate, you can see that the difference there for the city is, $131,400. So this is something we view as it's a great opportunity for cities and hotel operators to work together to think of ways to generate occupancy. And then some next steps that we would recommend as you're going through this period of recovery and really trying to be creative and leverage the strengths of Newark. One is just regularly checking hotel statistics so that you're aware of what's happening and can make strategic decisions about what to do next. Interviewing, engaging with hotels to understand, what are the challenges that they're facing, what are the strengths that they see in the market that could be leveraged, and what are the opportunities. And then considering an increase in the TOT rate to contribute to Newark's general funds, and considering updating that ordinance. I trust, again, from what we saw watching the rest of the council meeting, that there are a lot of worthy projects that those funds could go to fund. And then we're open
available
for
for questions.
So let me start with, do you think that the opportunity for additional hotels in Newark is somewhat passing us by? Or
No, I wouldn't say that. I think that I think it's appropriate that Ms. Lee has forecast, a conservative way out of this, because it is really hard to say exactly when Bay Area business traffic is going to come back. But this is one of the crown jewels in the world in terms of where people want to live and locate businesses. And certainly the hotel industry is willing to take much more of a bet on Newark than they would in, say, Topeka or Stockton. And the reason is because even though, as Sandra really identified well, as a percentage, the Bay Area and Newark took a tremendous hit in revenues, the actual dollar amount that people spend to stay in the Residence Inn or the Homewood Suites is considerably higher than other places in the country. And while that may be difficult for an individual hotel owner to deal with now, everybody's looking at the future. So the answer is Newark has higher prospects than most by far of getting new hotel development. And a couple of reasons, right? It's easier to develop in Newark than it is across the Dumbarton Bridge. Another is that the extended stay properties have done so well here in town that there are some other branded hotels, and I'll just mention a couple. If somebody really analyzes the market, they may come in what's called an Element Hotel. It used to be a Starwood brand that was just starting, but of course Marriott has brought Starwood under their aegis. And so they're developing many, many Element hotels, including quite a number around the Bay Area. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's on the horizon for Newark. Another one that in the Hilton brand of hotels, you have a Homewood Suites that does very well here, as you're well aware. And they have a similar product that's a little bit of a different market, but it's similar market called the Home2 Suites. And you've seen many of those maybe in your travels. And I would rather suspect that anybody that was doing a very deep dive into the Newark market, those would be two of the kinds of hotels that I would expect to see on your horizon. In addition to soft branded boutiques, a lot of these big branding companies want to compete with boutique hotels that are genuinely independent. And so you've seen 15, 20 new brands from the big 5 families of brands of hotels that are out there that are called the Luxury Collection or the Curio Collection or name some others. Autograph Collection. These are all meant they're designed to do two things: to keep that loyal customer coming to, say, Hilton or Marriott or Hyatt or you name it, but also to give the people that prefer to have a unique experience in each location, continuing to have their monies be spent at a branded hotel, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't be surprised to see an Autograph Collection or something like that come into town as well.
Okay. Other questions from Councilmember Collazo?
Thank you, Your Honor. I was afraid that it was going to take all my questions. So, we have a beautiful Solomon Center here in Newark. And, we have swimming, we have baseball diamonds, we have soccer fields. And I personally feel that we need more soccer fields so we can bring tournaments into our great city of Newark. Now, in the study, by any chance, did they include how much parents spend an additional for their family when they come to a tournament?
It's a great question. There have been some places that specifically, towns that have built these to attract tournaments, and I'm thinking of a number that are around the country. And I'm sure there are some analyses. We'd be happy to look at those and share them with you. But it wouldn't be that dissimilar from what we said. It's a tremendous amount of money that's spent because when you bring a whole family, yeah, maybe it's not an expense account like the business person, but they've got the brother and the sister and sometimes the aunt and the uncle come. And it's a really perceptive question that you offer, council member, because what is true of Newark hotels is that you have tremendous occupancy from Sunday night through Thursday night and somewhat less on Friday and Saturday. And so
that's where your opportunity
that's
is.
Where your biggest opportunity
is. A very smart approach is to think about those weekends.
We think about those weekends. One thing that we would just note, because you've been the recipient of this, again, great economic development and great geographic location in terms of your highways and with the airports, you haven't had to do that. You haven't had to reach out to the leisure traveler to have these great, pre-COVID rates. That said, you also don't have, and this is not a criticism, but there isn't a website that people can go to that explains exactly what you're talking about, or says that, hey, you can be here and be on the bike trail and go across the Dumbarton Bridge. You can get out to the Don Edwards Regional Park. You can walk safely around town in an all-American kind of small town experience within, this sort of haven within the rest of the Bay Area. all of those things are ripe for sharing with the world, and it's not necessarily very expensive to do that. A website, you know, one person who is involved in that website, who coordinates with it. These are options that you have, and they're not expensive options at a low level. And it'd be fun to talk about some of those things. But even without expansion of some of those facilities, you have a lot to brag about already with your festivals, with your restaurants, with the perception of safety, and just this central location. You can get to anywhere pretty easily.
We have 84.
84.
Easy access.
Get to San Ramon. Who else can get to Bishop Ranch at San Ramon and get to Meta and get to San Jose and get up to the Oakland airport, you know, as easily? Nobody.
Thank you.
By any chance, have you looked at the impact of like what Cruise America has on our hotel?
You know, we're aware that they're here. We're looking forward to, you know, we're hotel nerds. We love talking with everyone, and it'd be fun to do some more interviews of some of the specific hoteliers. Yeah. But we're broadly aware, of course, that it's a significant impact. There are local hotels that have done very well with tours because, again, excellent price availability on the weekends when otherwise the rooms would go unsold. So there is a local hotel that's been particularly good at attracting tours that then a bus goes from here and then goes up to San Francisco and comes back. Yeah. So that's an opportunity, and it's similar to what you're talking about.
Because in Cruise America, I think 70% of their customer base comes from Europe.
Yes.
And then they require that once they're in America, that they have to spend a night before they'll release a vehicle to them.
Oh. Yeah, there you go.
So we get a lot of them in Newark.
And I just don't think that a lot of people even know, frankly, you know, if somebody's from Chicago, do they know, when they hear the word Newark, it's most likely they're thinking about a town that's not quite as nice in the other direction, right?
To the east.
And so it's amazing what a little bit of investment does there. We're, you know, of course, you can do whatever you would like to do in that regard, but it's an opportunity, is the way I would call it.
Okay, Vice Mayor Hannon.
Thank you, Mayor. Excellent presentation. Greatly appreciate it. Do hotels pay for apps to have their hotel be one of the first searches that people see when they look for a hotel in a certain area?
They certainly do, yeah.
And do you know if our hotels take advantage of that?
We haven't done a deep dive into that. It's certainly something that we can look at. It's usually, especially because most of your hotels are branded, it's often decisions that are made brand policy, as well as at the local level in terms of their own marketing budget. But yes, you can pay, for example, with Expedia to get your position above the other hotels. And it's a whole strategy and a whole game. Yeah.
Because I think you highlighted correctly our proximity to the various airports is just perfect. And you mentioned many of our local businesses and the high-tech businesses that we have in our community, when they do arrange for business travel, do they point their employees or their associates to local hotels here in Newark, as far as you know, which then hopefully reciprocate by providing maybe a modest discount in terms of creating this partnership? Do you know if those relationships exist?
Yeah, yes, and that's where Mark was saying too. It'd be interesting. That's we brought up interviewing hoteliers to kind of learn more of the specifics of that. But yes, those kinds of relationships no doubt exist, and that's kind of the norm in terms of how hotels work with businesses.
They do.
And sales relationships.
They do. I won't identify the hotel, but we're aware, for example, and this isn't the only one we're aware of, but an entire floor of one of your prominent local hotels that's always available, first come, first served, to a prominent local business. And if they don't need them within a couple of days of the day coming up, then they can be resold. But yeah, that's a very common thing. And it's a win-win, because if somebody stays here for 7 days, instead of losing them on the Friday and Saturday, it makes sense to give them a 5% discount to have them stay 7 nights, you know, and help your occupancy on the weekends, if that makes sense.
I think our hotels, in my opinion, need to do a better job of highlighting restaurants at their facilities. I was at the Bistro 880 last night over at the Hilton DoubleTree. It's an outstanding restaurant, very reasonable prices. I think they need, in my opinion, to do a better job of advertising within the local community that this is a restaurant. It's not a standalone restaurant, but it's a restaurant within a hotel that provides quality food. You certainly don't generally have to wait an hour or so to be seated. You can generally be seated fairly quickly. I think they can do a better job in that respect.
Yeah, well, no comment, I mean, not speaking specifically to them, but it's a common issue that a lot of hotels have that have a restaurant. Typically, hotels are operated by hoteliers, and often the restaurant business is quite different, and so you often find the dynamic that you're talking about, and it can be really helpful to think about the local community and think about the opportunities that are there to bring people in.
You're preaching to the choir, and you know.
Yeah.
For example, if they have an unused meeting space, invite the Rotary Club in and have them come in.
I had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, exactly, there you go. So, and there are many other clubs, but Rotary is a good example, so.
And of course, that then took away my train of thought. Your presentation compared Newark to a number of other communities, but one thing your presentation lacked, at least in my opinion, was kind of the total volume of rooms in those respective cities.
Yes.
For example, if Newark has 1,000 rooms, for example, but Palo Alto, Menlo Park have 300, that certainly is an issue that would dictate the average daily rate. So I might suggest in the future, it may have been in the report, I just didn't see it, kind of a comparison in terms of the total number of rooms, because that's certainly something to consider.
Yeah.
Can Newark support, and I got the impression in terms of your response to the mayor's question, can we support an upscale hotel in Newark? It sounds like we could.
Yes, I believe so. I think that'll be a step that somebody will take. It'll be pioneering. What's interesting is the hotel development, 95% of hotel development is pretty non-imaginative in the country. It's where 5 Hampton Inns have done well, or, you know, Holiday Inn Expresses, whichever ones are their competitors, you build a 6th. But at some point, someone is going to decide that, hey, Newark should have a real hotel that is a step even above that. And it's inevitable. But what it takes is a pioneering investor that's done that before and says, yeah, I know Newark can handle it. And it would be a real win for Newark because, you know, I'll just take the competitor to Tesla that's recently expanded dramatically here. I'm sure they would love to have something like that, to have some of their most prominent investors and some other people come into. And for every significant business in town, there would be some unmet occupancy that potentially goes across the bridge to the Hotel Nia, for example, if you're familiar with that, just in Menlo Park or right next to Menlo Park. So yes, there's some unmet demand there. It takes a pioneering personality. It takes a developer that has a pretty good balance sheet, because the bankers ask a lot more questions of somebody that wants to develop a pioneering hotel as opposed to one that has 7 similar ones in the market and they can prove that it's readily available. To your other point, Vice Mayor Hannon, actually, you know, the Newark market is somewhat smaller than, and we'd love to give you more perspective on it, somewhat smaller than the Palo Alto / Menlo Park combined, as well as considerably smaller than Mountain View, Cupertino combined. And so that's why when Sandra said that you had the 2 new hotels in 2019 with the 2 new coming in with the loss of the town place, that as a percentage of hotel rooms, you've had to absorb more than other markets, and that's what makes your resiliency as compared with very directly Fremont and Milpitas all the more remarkable.
Excellent. And then my last 2 comments, Mr. Ben-Nun, is staff looking at or considering an increase in the TOT, and is that something you're going to bring back to the council for further discussion?
Sure, we have 2 years
Yes.
yes. So at some point, potentially down the line, 2 years, yes.
Okay. And then my last comment, Mr. Benoon, I'm a big believer in highlighting the city of Newark, any opportunity we can brand our name. And I know we have the new hotel right along the 880 that Mr. Turner mentioned. I'd always love to see the city, Newark referenced on the hotel because it is who we are. And so would simply suggest to staff as we build these new hotels, consider maybe putting the city of Newark on the hotel, just again to highlight this great community. Thank you, Mayor, for your comments or time.
Other questions? Anybody? Would Mr. Bucci have any questions?
He does not have a hand raised, Your
Okay.
Honor.
Okay, then this was informational only, so we want to thank you both for excellent presentation and appreciate all the knowledge and forethought that went into it, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the next is city council matters. And let's see, why don't we start with Councilmember Bucci? I do want to commend Councilmember Bucci for hanging in through this meeting because he's a little bit under the weather, but he's been very active in attending this meeting just remotely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't be there tonight under the weather, but I did enjoy learning our hotel tax than I thought I could ever know. So that was great. Just real quickly, I certainly didn't want to miss tonight because I believe that this will be the last full meeting put on by our illustrious mayor. So there was no way I was missing this one. And it was a doozy. They certainly weren't going to let your last meeting be an easy one. So congratulations on that. And I guess, you know what? I guess I'll quickly say, returns are still coming in, but it looks like I will be reelected for another term. So I wanted to thank the people of Newark, and we'll have more to say on that at our next meeting. And I would like to also congratulate our new mayor-elect, Vice Mayor Mike Hannon, on winning his election as well. So congratulations to him, and I look forward to serving another 4 years under him as mayor. And then lastly, just a very happy Thanksgiving to everybody. And as the holidays kick off, I hope everybody has a nice Thanksgiving, and we will see you in December.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Frey.
Yeah, thank you. It's been 27 years on this long journey with you as a part-time, but as a full-time, so I understand that the next meeting will be just half of a meeting for you, so thank you for your services this long journey, and more will be said on the next meeting.
Yes.
And to all of Newark residents and all families, a happy Thanksgiving season.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and Councilmember Collazo.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, congratulations to our mayor-elect and Councilmember Bucci for your reelection. I want to congratulate you guys both. Look forward to my next 2 years serving with my partners in crime here. And Al, I just want to say, it was 2011 when I was elected, and you were elected as mayor. And it's been a wonderful journey. You've been a wonderful mentor and advisor, and I want to thank you. And I hope our friendship lasts forever. I'm still going to have lots of questions for you. I'll still be calling you. You're on the speed dial, and I think since your name starts with A, Al, you're number one on that speed dial. And happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Be safe. And I guess that's it for right now. Shop.
Okay, thank you. And Vice Mayor Hannon.
Why is it, Mayor, I'm the only council member, vice mayor, that actually has a time limit on my comments here for some reason? And when I try to speed dial you, I get a busy signal every time.
I don't know, all my electronics went south here somewhere.
No, we'll have certainly more to say at our
Yeah.
next council meeting, but we're certainly proud of our mayor. 42 years of public service to the city of Newark. No one loves the city of Newark more than Mayor Al. And that's certainly demonstrated in his years of service. Oftentimes, and I worked in government, so I saw a lot of government employees. They get to the end of their career, they look tired, they sound tired, and they are tired. This man continues to operate as if he were 35 years old with all the volunteer work that he does in this community, in addition to being the mayor of the greatest city in the East Bay. So your service is certainly to be commended, and you're certainly going to be missed. And I know where you live, so that's okay. I want to take a moment just to thank all the veterans. Tomorrow's Veterans Day. And as we stood and saluted the flag, you know, we lost a lot of great Americans over the years who fought and died so that we had the opportunity to pledge our flag. Tuesday was Election Day. Congratulations, Mr. Bucci. But that is one of the rights and privileges that our veterans fought for. And we can never take those efforts for granted. And just need to be reminded when you see a service person, just say thank you for serving our country. Thank you for the service that you've provided us. And they'll appreciate it. So let's make sure we do that. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. And I echo my colleague's comment, shop Newark.
Shop Newark.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, and as a final comments for tonight, I would like to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. That's will be upon us before we know it. Also, congratulations to not only the people who look like they're going to easily win this recent election, but all those who ran, because you know, it takes something larger commitment out of you when you do run for public office, and you know, whether it's well, whatever position it might be, it's a lot of work, and you know, the rewards are in the service, but you learn so much just by the running, and so I want to congratulate you for putting your name in the ring. And then, as the Vice Mayor pointed out, tomorrow is Veterans Day, and you know, it's a day that I always reflect upon as the day that's the home of the free, you know, because of the brave. And you know, there's no place like America, and there's no place like you know, the United States that we live in, and the people who have gone before us and committed themselves to the more perfect union that we live in, you know, because of their service. So thank all of those who have served and are serving. We appreciate all your efforts for us. And with that, we are adjourned.